Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Lovely to be here with you again. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Jackie. Welcome to you. Welcome, as usual, to all of our listeners. Hope everyone's keeping well and travelling nicely. So, Jack, have you got anything you want to say to start the session? No? Okay.
No,
Well,
just lovely to be here with you all and looking forward to what's in store for today.
Yeah, likewise here. So I'll launch straight into it, Jackie. So we continue today with podcast 35, listeners, completing chapter 7. In the last session, I'll just give a quick recap, Jackie, of last session. In the last session, I outlined at length and in great detail the meaning of the word faith. That's the chapter heading, the threefold faith. And how this faith, which is also known as Shraddha, and also known as the Sanskrit word meanings for Shraddha, what's in the heart. So faith, Shraddha, what's in the heart, are all mean exactly the same thing. That these three, in conjunction with the three gunas of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, continuously play out in our daily lives. And hence why I spent a lot of time last week on it and how I'm going to spend a lot of time this week, but also why Krishna spends the entire chapter 17, because it's a critical aspect of everyone's day-to-day living throughout their entire life and throughout their entire lifetimes. So it's very, very important. It's who we are, how we tick, what makes us say and do and think what we do, why we don't do something else. It all ties in with these aspects of what's in the heart. And you asked about the heart, Jackie, and it's not the physical pump organ that pumps blood. It's a pure heart in the sense of when it's sattvic and when it hasn't got any of these impediments that we're discussing and looking at. And so in that sense, it's a pure heart. But there's an aspect of the heart that is called the emotions, which can be very harmful for people in how they misuse them. And they can be very helpful if they're used the correct way. And same with the mind. We've only got one mind and one emotion, but we've got two rulers for it, all right? Either ego or buddhi, the higher self. And if ego controls the mind and emotions, well, the being suffers enormously mentally and emotionally throughout their lives. And invariably that leads to physical suffering as well. If the being tries to live by the laws, the rules, dharma, the laws of creation, truthful living, which we're trying to ascertain and understand more clearly, well, then that person invariably is being ruled by sattva, or in the state of sattva being ruled by the what we call buddhi, or the intuition, or the true knowing. All right. So we can use when we observe these things, these qualities playing out in our everyday lives, we get an opportunity to observe what we're thinking, saying and doing, and then using our free will to make positive changes. This is what we've been discussing all of the 17 chapters so far, isn't it, Jackie, too? On that battlefield Arjuna's faced. Do I make changes, or do I just simply continue the way I've been going? And he decides to make changes. So all through the teaching, we've been looking at these changes that we're able to make. And when we've got the knowledge, well, then it's really free will, and you either follow the teachings and understand them and they appeal to you and you know they're right and truthful. And when you practice it, you see that makes you a happier type of person. And if you don't, well, you get the contrary. All right, so he says, I'm explaining that this is simply using the word faith in another way to what people normally associate it with. But it's to help Arjuna understand that what's in the heart are all his desires, beliefs, opinions, likes, dislikes, expectations, and so on. Everyone in the planet, their lives are ruled by those half dozen words. I'm sure you understand that clearly, and I'm sure all our listeners do as well. All of our treasures, we call them our treasures. We build a wall around them, like the wall of Jericho in the biblical story. Yeah. And then Jericho came and he blew his trumpet and the walls came tumbling down. Well, people, historians and that say, oh, there was an earthquake and stuff like that. The symbolism in that story, listeners, is that Jericho is blowing the sound of truth in the trumpets, and the vibration of the sound of truth broke down the walls, the barriers around the heart, where all this, what's in the heart, is stored. Because when you put a barrier around your heart, Jackie and listeners, it not only stops what's in there going out, so your treasures, good or bad or ugly, are all in there and they're trapped in there. But worse, truth can't come in because the barrier works both ways. So we need the truth, the sound of truth, to crumble those walls down so we can let the junk out, the rubbish, the stuff that's no good for us, and let the purity and whatever in. There's a simple little story, isn't it?
It's so beautiful. And when I mentioned last week that, I was so interested in the heart because it's often a theme I speak to in my yoga teaching, and
yes,
that sentiment you've just expressed there is it entirely. And I think it's why in yoga, often in those heart opening or chest opening poses, people often do unexpectedly break out in tears or emotion because something touches upon the dialogue of the class, and the corresponding opening chest action has a very powerful effect.
Yeah,
Very, very beautiful.
exactly, Jackie. And those poses have been designed by great masters with those specific aspects in mind. So part of the physical, we've got a physical body. So if whatever we can do there, like meditation to relax it, exercise, healthy foods, all of that, and these poses that you're saying that are specifically there to open the heart, or whatever way you just described it, that is part of the sounds of truth. Then comes the sounds of truth. What I think I'm speaking, or what I know I'm speaking, doing to people as well. So when you're doing any of your sessions from now on, you might every now and again like to chuck in the little story of the walls of Jericho come tumbling down. Here we're starting to get the cracks going in physical sense, and here's something now on a intellectual and truthful sort of sense. All good. So he says, so I'm going to say that all of our treasures are on this computer program, and treasures are both what we like and what we don't like. So in a perverse way, we want to avoid things we don't like, people we don't like, food we don't like, going to places we don't like. So we're constantly, as human beings, chasing after the ones we like and running away from the ones we don't like. So it's called positive desires and negative desires. The negative ones are called aversions. We don't want them, we try and avoid them. And we give all of our energy and our focus to this in our daily lives throughout our whole life. When we're little toddlers and that, we don't know, we're just doing impulsive things. As we get older, when we're young, 12, 14, 16, we start to know what's right and what's not right. By the time we sort of, the wise tell us that 16 is really when Buddhi's capable of kicking in full time. We're starting to be expected as human beings, if nothing else, just to know the difference between killing someone and not killing someone, stealing money or not stealing money, any of these sorts of things. Well, when you look around the world, you see how many people struggle with even those basic, very simple, basic sort of concepts, let alone jealousy and anger and intolerance and hatred and all of that. So Krishna now goes on to explain to Arjuna, Jackie, in the rest of the chapter, the powerful effect the three gunas of sattva, rajas and tamas have on any individual in certain aspects of their lives. And he gives examples such as worship, food, sacrifice, purification and charity. These are spelled out in detail in the Gita. I won't have time to go through all of them fully, but I'll reference some so people get an idea what's being described there. So to illustrate...
And luckily, sorry to interrupt, I was just going to say, I know there's quite a few of our listeners that are reading the corresponding chapters as we go along. So for those of you that are, you'll get the extra reference. And for those that are not, be encouraged. It's a beautiful way to really learn more about what we're speaking about here.
Well, we've said a couple of times, Jackie, just on that to the listeners, these podcasts, if that's all you're sort of requiring at this stage of your journey, well, that's lovely, and I'm sure you'll be getting a lot out of it. But for those that are further advanced and happy to do extra work, well, reading the Gita, and you outlined one, a very easy, simple one, but very potent, Jack Hawley's walkthrough for Westerners, and I outlined Ishwaran's, which is a lengthy one with lots of illustrations, but again, at early stages for people to grasp it. But it could be any Gita that anyone's got. People have maybe purchased their own Gita through different sources or for different reasons. Well, they're all, anyone who's got a Gita, you look at chapter 17 and it'll be covering what I'm talking about now, as have all the other chapters. Okay, so he starts off with a first description regarding worship. He says, worship, to illustrate this, Krishna tells Arjuna that each person worships in accordance with their temperament and disposition, meaning their gunas. That's what everything we do is according to our gunas, because they rule us. We ultimately need to understand that. Those beings being sattvic adore the Paramatman. I've referred to the Paramatman, that's the great Atman. Consciousness, Brahman, the Supreme Being, God, in any of those words, that's the Paramatman. That's the highest that any seeker of truth can worship, the great entity. Those that aren't at that level, well, then they worship other gods, like some people worship the Virgin Mary or different saints and different gurus in the East and things like that. And that's all okay, and it's all rightful steps. And they also worship the devas, the gods of heaven, of light, and the celestial deities. So there's, especially in the Indian teaching, Jackie and listeners, that there's many gods. There's the god of wealth and the god of power and the god of love and all sorts. They're all aspects of the one God, but they give titles or labels to them to help people zero in little sub sort of sections. The Rajasic worship the yakshas or the rakshasas, they're Sanskrit words, which being the cosmic embodiments of greed and egotistic ambitions. Even in the sound of those words, you can sort of hear a negative sort of sound, can't you? The yakshas, yakshas and rakshasas. And these are powerful, fearsome spirits or lesser gods, driven by the lust for power, pleasure, wealth, anger, revenge, jealousy, hatred, and so on. Now, what's above, so below. So all the human beings that worship anger and hatred and whatever are worshipping those sorts of deities, those sorts of gods. That's the sort of subtlety behind it. They don't go to church, a greedy church or a murder church or something like that. But in their hearts, that's the temples. Our body's a temple, so that's like a church. That's where you pray or you don't pray, or who you pray to, the good or the bad or the indifferent, all that. And then there's the tamasic people, and we learned when we studied the three gunas that the tamasic people have early souls, early stages of travelling on the path of truth, and they've got a huge amount of work to do over many, many lifetimes to come. And he says they worship, being deluded, they are drawn to spirits of the dead, ghosts, goblins, evil spirits, tramp souls, trance mediums, speaking in tongues, and any other hurtful deities. We just had Halloween, they're sort of really an example of this tamasic worship, the ghosts and the skeletons you see around it, and skulls hanging everywhere. And in fact, people think, oh yeah, that's stuff they do in America and up in the Northern Hemisphere. But people needn't get sucked into those sort of fads, even if they catch on with some people. And I'm sure, I'm 100% certain that no person operating basically from a sattvic guna has got any of those displays in their gardens or whatever. It's just not part of who they are. All right. And then he mentions finally in this worship area, he says, finally, there's a small group who practice severe worship, contrary to the scriptures, and invent harsh ways to inflict pain on themselves. I've lived in the icy Himalayas for 15 years, some will say. These are some of the gurus, in India. Others lie bare-bodied on a bed of nails. Others stand on for hours on one leg with one arm raised, the other arm raised up in the air. Look how steady I am and disciplined I am. Others fast excessively or sit at length in a tub of crushed ice. And many people have seen these, in snippets and podcast things and stuff like that. And initially you think, oh, that's pretty good, but some people have got this ability that they can have tremendous control over their physical body. But Krishna goes on to say here, he says, these people are slaves to hypocrisy and egotism and are carried away by the fury of desire, passion and attachments. And in their ignorance, they torture and torment the senses and the organs of the body. When you think about it, lying there on a bed of nails, for most of us, we'd think that's torture, wouldn't we? Yet these people who worship it, they've mastered the art, but they think it's a positive sort of aspect. Well, Krishna's pretty scathing. He says in the actual material, he states clearly that all this is an offence to him. Quote, in their foolishness, they harass me also. He lives within them. So we've got God living within us. And it's all right if you think, well, I'll sit on a bed of nails. But that goes through into your spiritual sort of entity as well, if you understand what I'm saying here, Jackie. So he says, in their foolishness, they harass me also, who live within them. Know that these beings are of demonic resolve, harming their spiritual growth. So he makes it pretty clear that it's not as good as they think it is, and it's actually harmful to their spiritual growth. It's holding them back because the devotion is false and not aimed at the right for the right reason. Anything you'd like to add here, Jackie?
Yes, definitely. From a yoga perspective, it makes me remember in my yoga training, our teachers talking about some of the very austere and harsh and, incredibly strong practices and sort of a warning given against them that, yes, you can put a lot of mindful effort into mastering, extreme poses that most bodies are never capable of. But to what point? Like you're channeling all your energy into something that ultimately is a sideways diversion. You really could be better spent and better encouraged spending your energy seeking the truth and doing some more spiritual practices. So,
Yeah.
and given that most people come to yoga and always with an apology, oh, I'm not very flexible, I can't do yoga, I don't think it's for me. I mean, in this moment, be reassured. It's often the gentle practices, it's the most accessible stretching, the most accessible breathing, the most basic meditation techniques that are often the most deeply beneficial.
Yeah. A total contrast to what you're saying. So you've got obviously a very strong background and understanding of this compared to what I've just read out. And I don't think many of our listeners, Jackie, would be taken in with that harsh sort of what they think's devotion. But it's in the material, and it's worth mentioning that's the Sattvic, Rajasic, and whatever. And this one just comes under the heading of severe, like you said, or austerity type thing. So. You've just said exactly what's here and in the yoga sort of system. That's a beautiful, truthful concept to have. So anything else you wanted to say, Jackie?
The only other thought that comes to mind, and I think I've mentioned this in previous episodes, but it comes to light again now, thinking, certainly in yoga world where you meet, so-called senior teachers that are very, very advanced physically and can do these extreme things. I have to say that in times in real life where I've met some of these characters, sometimes you really get a sense there's not a lot of love and light and forgiveness in them. I mean, occasionally you come across people that, their bodies are just beautifully blessed and they've worked hard to be incredibly flexible. that's a different sort of scenario. You know, those people do have a lot of love in them. But yeah, it's not uncommon to come across very harsh, seeking sort of people that, from my sense, observing the way they're seeking, it's a little bit misguided. They're
Yeah,
missing the
yeah,
truth and the love and just the
yeah.
breadth of the
It's
heartfelt approach that
yeah,
could be there.
it's yeah. Other sort of ways of saying what you're saying there, or other terms, is like tryhards, the look at me's. You know, particularly the beautiful women in gymnasiums or you know, yoga or any of those sessions love to have the beautiful outfits, the figure hugging ones, and it's sort of like, you know, they're not shouting it out, but in another sense they are. Look how beautifully I can do these poses. Look how glamorous I look. Look, you know. So you know, all of that is anything that's got that tinge in it. Is ego, obviously ego based, and if it's got any just the faintest tint of ego, it's tarnishing the effect. So you might be 90% pure, but a bit of ego me in there sort of like poisons it. It's like you got a beautiful meal and you put a drop of poison into it. Well, it spoils the whole meal, doesn't it? So in that sense, it does the same to the being. All right, Jackie, I'll continue on. He gives another example regarding food. So we all eat food and like it, and like different foods and whatever. So in a practical digression, Krishna now describes the different kinds of food preferred by the Sattvika, Rajasika and Tamasic person. There's a general misconception here, but a lot of people think that the food you eat make you either Sattvic, Rajasic or Tamasic. In actual fact, it's the other way around. The foods are neutral, but in the sense that, you know, they're just foods. But well, I'll read it out rather than putting it in my own words. It says it's the food that people consume which creates their guna balance. When in fact it's the other way around. These three classes of people prefer to eat their respective types of food. What we eat is important because it has both physical and mental consequences. So, you know, if you eat sort of food that's been contaminated, for example, well, your instant reaction would be very quickly vomiting or diarrhea or something like that. In other cases, food poisoning, you know, if it's severe, can hospitalise people for a number of days and so on. So there's that's just obvious sort of ones. So he describes now the types of foods according to the predominant guna of the being. He says the Sattvika person will naturally choose foods that are fresh, delicious, substantial, nourishing, soothing and savoury, and are conducive to spiritual growth, health, vigour and happiness. And, you know, in your line of work, Jackie, any dietitians listening, people who, you know, are keen about their foods would understand all of those hookups with the different aspects of the being. The Rajasika person will naturally choose foods which are more dry, salty, bitter, pungent, moorish, addictive, spicy, sweet, piping hot, and so on. I must put my hand up here, Jackie. So spicy food.
I must too. I must too.
And anyone listening, you must too. Well, all right. It's not the end of the world. And you don't necessarily have to stop, but just understand that it's in here saying that I've known people who have overdone those sorts of, you know, you can overdo it and then have, you know, the spiciness can start eating away at your intestines and stuff like that. So, you know, it's not a joking matter, but
I think moderation might be the word where
yeah,
some of us are looking for here.
yeah. So what if you say, well, I'm eating fresh, nourishing, spicy food? Well, then you got the fresh and the nourishing from Sattva and a bit of take away. But don't get too hooked up on this, Jackie and folk. It's just broad classifications of, you know, you know, more to focus on things like addictive, you know, for example, you know, the fast takeaway foods, Big Macs and pizzas and, you know, Subways and any, you know, fish and chips, anything like that. They're moreish and, you know, they taste nice, but then, you know, they all claim that they're nourishing, but they're not as nourishing as they make out. You get obviously some nourishment out of it, you know, it keeps people alive. I've read about people who have lived on hamburgers for 10 years and then they die, but nourished them for 10 years. Anyway, these foods suit the warrior class of people, you know, and that's people who are particularly active, you know, tradesmen and, you know, bricklayers and concreters, people working, farmers, you know, they prefer a lot of those foods. But they can produce some unhappiness in the person. Yeah, you get digestive problems and you don't sleep well if you overeat or the food's too heavy, those sorts of things, you know, and eventually it can lead to serious diseases. And the thoracic persons will naturally choose foods which are tasteless, not very nourishing, overcooked, stale, unclean, insipid, impure. Yeah, we know people that do that, or we know of them, and there's the different foods that they cater for. I mean, you know, in unfortunate circumstances, you got the homeless people eating food out of dump masters, you know, out the back of supermarkets or food stores and that. Sad, but that comes under this sort of category. Well, it wouldn't be very healthy eating food out of those sorts of areas. And then just a couple of tips for some general healthiness, and that is that the wise recommend eating foods which are in season, which many people would understand, I'm sure, and also in the climate that you live in. So one of the things that's sort of a bit of a no-no is that these days you can get, you know, if you like cherries, for example, you can eat cherries all year because they import them in from different parts of the world. But the suggestion is that in whatever area you're living in, say Victoria, all cherries are around November, December, and best to not have cherries in June or July. Yet you have different fruits in the different seasons because the body reacts differently to the seasons. That's pretty clear, isn't it? And then he goes on briefly just to, Krishna further explains that these groups of people perform sacrifice or yajna through their performance of action. So we're looking at action now. And just briefly says Sattvika, I've just written in there, keeping it brief, Sattvika people perform actions according to the scriptures, pure actions, meeting the needs, and not desiring of the fruit or the results of the action. And we covered that in detail in chapters 3 and 4 when we looked at karma, action, karma. The Rajasika people perform actions for self-glorification and for the sake of its results. So it's all basically egoically driven, you know, what's in it for me, the wages, you know, the good conditions, the whatever it might be. But not that doesn't always meet the need and serve your purpose the way it could, and others either, because it's not fitting into the general plan. And then the Kamasic people, well, they perform actions thoughtlessly, recklessly, carelessly, habitually, lazily, sheep-like, stupid and ignorant, harmful to themselves and to others. So when you see some of these people ramming police cars and speeding along in a chase, you know, and doing 200 kilometres, well, that's reckless, isn't it? Reckless action, reckless behaviour, no consideration for their own safety or for anyone else's safety. Often there's enormous crashes, people get killed, people get injured, all sorts of things. People running around with machetes and home invasions and that, well, they come under tamasic actions. All that's behind it is greed and, you know, stuff like that. So How are we going? Going sort of fairly all right at this stage.
I was about to say we're going well, but I don't see how many pages of notes you've got in front of you.
Well, we've only got about 5 minutes, so I'm going to leave a little section out.
Sure.
But it's not. It's just another session he covers that's on austerity, purification of the body, mind, and soul. And this is practicing learning to behave. That is bringing one's whole being into harmony with the true self. So that's that aspect of austerity or purification of the being. And he refers again to the three people. But I'll just give that a miss. The same patterns that I've just described with worship and sacrifice and foods applies to austerity and charity, and I've written in a few others as well. Equally applies to all other areas in our lives, such as the clothes we wear and choose, and where we wear them and how we wear them, the music we listen to, the books we read, magazines, whatever it might be, things we watch, movies, TV, podcasts, anything on your iPads and anything like that. The company we keep, birds of a feather flock together. So in this sense, all the people listening to these podcasts, Jackie, are our company. Yeah. And the truth is Satwik. So it's a group of Satwika type people performing this particular activity. Company we keep, recreational activities, the sports you play and so on. Like some people go and watch cage fighting, where the blokes are literally in a cage. It's, you see a bit of it on news and things like that, where they're punching the living daylights out of each other. You can see blood pouring out, and people love it. People love going watching pit bull terriers fight each other. Even rooster fighting is popular in countries and cultures and stuff like that. And I've just written in here that some of the listeners, Jackie, I know a lot of these things for me have changed over the years. So as you work in this area, music that you might have listened to a long time ago will no longer appeal to you. Heavy metal or a rap or something, it'll be too jarring. You want like food, soothing music, orchestras and, things like that. So same with what you watch on TV. Might have loved, a lot of the reality shows for many years. But then you start saying, gee, this is all, a bit of junk and whatever. I'm wasting my life, So people have been, I'm sure, making changes. But part of your exercise will be to observe where you're making changes from now on for the rest of your life. Know that those changes will be taking place because of the fact that you're getting new knowledge and you're wanting to raise yourself to higher spiritual levels, whether it's music or clothes or food or whatever it might be. Is all that making sense, Jackie?
It is. Gee, I'm just thinking, in light of my recent news last week, facing a significant illness, there's nothing like, the uncertainty of how you'll potentially survive through that to really kickstart an awareness of absolute closeness of attention of what goes into your body, what chemicals you expose yourself to, natural fibers on the skin. Even this thing, I'm not particularly worried, but it crosses my mind. We don't really know how long we'll all last on this planet. So the types of activities that we do when you've had a little health scare, and you know that time and life is precious, it makes you really focus very much on who you want to spend your time with, what you want to put your attention on.
Yeah.
So sometimes these things, as harsh and confronting as they can be, certainly remind us to put more effort into the good things that we know are uplifting, more healthful, more beneficial, more things that just top us up and bring us a lot of joy.
Well, what you've described there, is exactly the reference I made last week when this was being discussed, and saying how when anyone hears, particularly with cancer, the doctor says to them, "You've got cancer." Doesn't matter where. it's a terrible word, and everyone fears it in one sense or another. But those people say, many of those people, not all, but many of them say, when I heard those words, that instantly changed my whole life. Well, that's what you've just described. You're already saying, I'm going to be more careful even of the clothes that touch my skin, the foods I eat, the company, what activities I go to, where I put my energy and all of that sort of stuff. Which is beautiful and perfect, and will be of great benefit to you, as I mentioned last week, Jackie. But for the people who haven't got this knowledge, they can't do that. So they're just going to go through fear and dread and anxiety and all of these sorts of things. So that's the reference that's constantly in the material, that without the truthful knowledge, a person continuously suffers in their lives, mainly mentally and emotionally, but also physically as well. All right, Jackie, last little section to finish off. This last section, it's only the last 3 or 4 slokas in the chapter, Jackie and listeners, but it takes a dramatic shift away from all of this now. So we're basically stopping the three-faced and the gunas, which the whole chapter's been focused on, but it's a little segue, if you like, or a lead into the last chapter, chapter 18. It's a beautiful little segue, I might add. So, some of this material's doom and gloom because you're looking at a lot of rajasic stuff and a lot of tamasic stuff, but it's all part of people's lives, and unless people understand all the alternatives and how it all operates, you can't make changes or not meaningful changes. So once you know how the system works, how it all operates, in this case, summing up how vital the 3 gunas are and what's in our heart, which is our computer program, that's my personality, my nature, in other words, then we can start saying, well, I don't like this part of what's in my heart. I'm going to get rid of it, and I know how to get rid of it, and I don't like this part. And what I'd like to, you can't just get rid of something and have a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum, listeners. You can't have an empty space. So if you take out of this walls crumbling down around your heart, the walls of Jericho, okay, the city means your heart, it becomes a two-way street. You let stuff out, but then stuff's got to come in. So, for example, hatred gets replaced by love coming in. Unkindness gets replaced by kindness coming in. Can't be a gap in there. So you replace, jealousy and greed, generosity comes in. If you realise you've been a bit greedy in your life or not as generous as you can be, well, you make a change. You say, I want to be more generous from now on. Doesn't mean go and give your house away and that. You can if you want, but I wouldn't recommend that. But greed is just even with your time and your speech. So you can be miserly, and on the other hand, you can be generous and just smile and say hello to someone walking past you. Probably surprise them and they might nearly faint. But that's generosity, that's kindness, all those sorts of things. I'm sure you and the listeners understand all of that. So, all right, I'll finish off on this note, Jackie, 5 minutes or so and we'll be done. So all of what we've been talking about is indicative of the spiritual evolution of the being, what their faith is. It's indicative of their faith, their shraddha, or what's predominant in their heart, and be it sattva, rajas, or tamas. So in the final few shlokas, to conclude chapter 17, Krishna dramatically changes course, and he explains to Arjuna now the mantra Om Tat Sat. You would have probably heard that, Jackie, and other ones that are similar, Mahat Tattva, all of those sorts of beautiful axioms. And just even saying it, I'm sure everyone picked their ears up, Om Tat Sat. It's got an uplifting sound, hasn't it? A smooth flowing sort of sound. So he wants to talk to him about Om Tat Sat. He explains to Arjuna that the mantra Om Tat Sat was declared in the early Vedas, that this mantra was to be the triple name for Brahman, consciousness itself, Om Tat Sat. And he explains the three sounds, or the three syllables. Each word represents the supreme consciousness from which everything else comes. In essence, it means God alone is the reality. Firstly, he explains Om. The followers of the Vedas always begin their ceremonial acts of sacrificial action, purity and charity by pronouncing the sacred syllable Om. In the groups I run, Jackie, we start our sessions by, as a group, repeating 3 Oms. Yeah, just a lovely way to, and then we go into our meditation. Om is the is the first sound, O, A, A-U-M, for the 3 gunas. And they're the 3 universal energies, we touched on those when we did the gunas, that bring about the creation. That's what the scientists say is the Big Bang. That's how it all started. In our language, it's the vibration. That's where the vibration comes in the creation, and everything in the creation vibrates at different levels. So our bodies are vibrating at a denser level, our mind and emotions are operating at a finer level, and our divine aspect, or our soul, is operating at a pure level. So we've got those 3 levels within every human being. So that's the significance of Om. It's a very powerful word. But even in our overall journey, Jackie, the being will have to transcend Om, the 3 gunas, to reach Brahman itself. Brahman's beyond Om, or any of the gunas. And he says Tat, Om Tat Sat. Tat's the next word. Denotes, really means that, meaning consciousness. Denotes that the above offerings, free from expectation of any fruit or of reward, those offerings that I mentioned, sacrificial action, purity and charity, they are free from expectation of any fruit or reward. They're done for that consciousness, the supreme reality alone. So that's when we don't do it for money or for fame or whatever. We do it because it's the rightful action, and it's done in reference or reverence to God itself. That makes it then a pure action. And Sat indicates the dedication of all true and good actions in life. So all the actions, all the thoughts, all the words anyone's doing in their lives is doing, and then hopefully increasingly do in the years to come. All of that is for the sake of that, the supreme, the truth, the reality. So we're bringing in powerful words here, Jackie, aren't we? Yeah. Which is what all the next chapter is going to be about. Shraddha, faith or devotion that we've spent this chapter on, is the one divine gift with which man makes progress both in this earthly life and in his spiritual pilgrimage. Not just this life, but all his lifetimes, his spiritual pilgrimage. Repeating the mantra Om Tat Sat creates an uplifted attitude to any activity. So listeners, you can all practice that. It's very easy. Om Tat Sat. It rolls off the tongue easy. You can say it at the traffic lights, while instead of saying, oh, I wish the bloody lights would change because I'm in a hurry, just utter the sounds, Om Tat Sat. It's a beautiful sound. It brings you into instant connection with your higher self. Only takes a second, 2 seconds. You can do it when you leave your computer at work and walking to the toilet. Yeah, Om Tat Sat. You don't have to say it out loud, you just say it to yourself. Anytime you think of it and you want, it's like cutting the link in a series of events that are taking place, physical, mental or emotional. So, and then there's, like in the thing in the creation, there's duality, 2 aspects, the dual aspect. So we've got Om Tat Sat, Sat being the pure, the whatever. Then he goes on to say that on the other hand, however, whatever is performed without faith, in other words, without truth, be it sacrifice, austerity, charity, or any other act, mental or physical or emotional, which lacks goodness, truth, or devotion, is called asat, not real, not that. So sat, and if you put a prefix a in front of it, it means the opposite. Sat's pure, asat, impure. Crystal clear, Jackie? So it's a negative aspect of sat. It's transient. It's not the truth. Such faithless practice is without merit or virtue and cannot add to spiritual growth. It is asat, unreal. It cannot have any meaning in this world or in other worlds, either here or hereafter. So it's big implication. Doesn't you don't want to be doing it in this lifetime. You shouldn't have done it last time, and try and avoid doing it next lifetime. Okay, Jackie? And I'll just give the exercise for people who are interested in doing it, and then you can have the final few words. Again, just some self-assessment to everyone. I'd like you to, or suggest you watch your faith, your Shraddha, what's in your heart. That's this city of Jericho that I've referred to a couple of times today, unintentionally, but it just popped in. See what's in there, and see which guna is driving or activating it. And then by seeing what, in other words, you're going to put yourself under the microscope. What's in there? All these desires, likes, expectations. Why have I got them there? Don't worry about how they got there. You put them there, but don't worry about that. All you need to worry about is observing that they're there and recognising in you that you don't want to be there. You won't recognise them all, maybe, but it doesn't matter. You've got to make a start somewhere. Even if you recognise one untruth, anyone, in there today, and you just say, I'm going to try and focus on that one, that'll be a great achievement. If you recognise 2 or 3 or half a dozen and you're game enough to tackle those, not all instantly enough, but saying that's my intention. That's what's going to motivate me from now on. It's going to change my guna from rajas or tamas, won't be anyone tamas, but rajas, into sattva. All right? So I'm done and dusted, Jackie. That was a lovely chapter.
Beautiful.
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Excellent.
I hope
Well,
all
thank
our
you for
listeners did.
preparing. Thank you for preparing it and sharing it. I think they did. No final words from me, but thank you. A lot of really beautiful food for thought there.
Food for thought. After all, section on food.
Yes.
All right, Jackie.
All right,
as
everyone.
usual, I wish you well, wish the listeners well, and we start chapter 18 next week.
Beautiful.
And I'll have a little bit to say about that in the first few minutes.
Oh, I feel sure you will. All right. Take care, everybody. See you.
Bye.